All right. Today we're going to talk about bring your own data and extending FinOps beyond the cloud. Quick overview, Ternary at a glance. We currently manage a lot of cloud spend across our customer base. As many folks do, there's lots of people using cloud. It's very popular, which is why I'm sure you're here. Deployment flexibility without compromise. We have a SaaS product as well as a self-hosted version and an incredibly responsive customer support team. Um, just a quick overview of the agenda today. So we'll run into limits of cloud-only FinOps, talk about why billing chaos blocks scale, what modern FinOps requires, and how Ternary can help you enable you and expand the scope for BYOD data. And at the end, we will jump into a live demo and have a little bit of time for some questions we can talk through at the end if you have any. All right. Up first, we can talk about just the need to expand the FinOps scope. So originally, when FinOps was kind of started or created, lots of companies were using data centers and had discovered all of the values of cloud with just the response times, the better cost, more flexibility, and a lot of people started moving over there and very quickly realized that it was much more nuanced and complicated than a data center bill, right? Because it's taking these costs, which are pretty static, from, annual commitments to per minute level billing row line items. And main things that people were optimizing for originally are things like hyperscalers, usage-based pricing, and having clear kind of ownership signals and delineations in their different business units. How that's evolved to today is there's SaaS costs, there's PaaS costs, we have data platforms. AI has been kind of the hot topic for a few years now, machine learning as well, and internal platforms and shared services. So there's just so much more different offerings available to both cloud and on-premise or hybrid deployments. Our bottom line here is, cloud-only FinOps just isn't cut it anymore, right? There's been a big need for getting a strong, reliable view into your total cost of ownership. And that's, something that we've seen, at Ternary as well as, in the FinOps Foundation. These finance teams just need to be able to have a valuable, reliable, accurate way to get their chargeback, showback handled and managed. So the real problem kind of starts with the billing chaos. And across a lot of modern tech stacks, we're seeing some inconsistent billing formats, missing and unusable metadata. There's kind of a tough, not really a good standard of cost. Manual reconciliation that's not really scaling. And so it gets, FinOps teams spending a lot of time digging into the data, trying to find a way to standardize or normalize that, right? Because if you have messy data, it can't really be actioned. It's difficult to follow. It's a lot of manual work. And so unfortunately that responsibility has to fall on somebody within your team or organization to do all of the legwork. And that can become, there's some people that have that's their entire job, and other people that it's a second or third responsibility. And it's just a pretty big undertaking to maintain and manage. The operating model for FinOps as itself is, got a pretty strong recipe for success, and I think this has been, iterated on over time since the conception of the foundation, and they've done a really good job of creating this kind of guideline or, community sourced best practices. And so, the key recipes for success here are going to be people who, building a centralized FinOps team. So having folks whose main responsibility it is to kind of manage and maintain FinOps and keep the rest of the organization aligned and up to date with that information, as well as how the internal process has been deployed and is kind of managed. From there, jump into the process. So making sure that we're adopting the FinOps framework or having a framework that works for your organization. And the last piece there is technology. So implementing Ternary or some internal cost tool management platform that you can have consistent, reliable numbers for. And so at Ternary, we have what we are calling the universal spend ledger. So you have a unified source of truth across all of your technology spend. And now we're going to kind of jump into what can break as scope expands. So we were talking a little bit earlier about all of the different pieces that kind of pull into your cloud bill and your hybrid configurations or just on-premise, all of the different moving parts that need to be reported back to finance and then maybe, you know, organized, cleaned up a little bit, and then presented in a nice fashion to your leadership teams, all of the areas of business, so that they can have a good understanding of what your spend drivers are and profit loss, etc. The bottom line here, though, is that when tools fail, billing lacks a common, or tools fail when billing lacks a common language. This was, again, kind of something that was identified by many contributors across the community, just with all of the different tools and clouds that people are deploying. And so the answer to that ended up being what the FinOps Foundation implemented, what they call Focus, which is a unified normalized billing standard. And so if you're familiar with, well, we can just talk about cloud for now. Google, Azure, and AWS all have a very similar billing structure, but there's some nuance to each where the naming is slightly different, and maybe some of them have certain fields in their detailed billing export that others don't have. And so with this working group, they identified a pretty consistent standard that you can say for most businesses, they're going to need these, 40 or 50, dimensions and metrics to be able to complete their financial process and get that billing accuracy, and maintain it. So the foundation partnered with the CSPs, got them on board, and now have available versions of the focus formatted files. In addition to that, you can see what they've put together as available open source on their GitHub page, and you can use their model on the detailed billing information to normalize that data into Focus, which just gives you a really clean billing file that you can report on. You can use it in your daily flows, and just helps kind of bring some of that chaos into clarity. And from there, Ternary decided what made the most sense for our customers, because these really detailed billing files that the clouds provide are incredible. There's a wealth of knowledge in there that is per minute level accuracy. And so instead of us just having the focus standard, which is going to be still a slight subset of that data, we have the availability, or we make it available to you to have the focus formatted information alongside every native vendor column that those CSPs provide to you. So you get to choose if you want to see the focus terminology. If you are more of an AWS person or a GCP person, you can build and manage your reports in that native terminology. And it makes it super easy to configure these reports and customize them to your needs. And then depending on who's consuming that information, they can see it in the terminology that they're most familiar with and most comfortable with. So got a little ahead of myself, talk about the way that Ternary implements this, but our kind of vision and goals for the way that we've implemented this normalization process and kind of helping organize the chaos is that we have one system to manage your total technology spend. And that technology spend is going to be your real total cost of ownership and profitability. So the key thing here is that we are bringing in all of your different teams into a single tool. So both finance and engineering are on the same page. They're looking at the same information, dashboards, reports, and Ternary itself has been built for scale. So as you saw earlier, we manage $7.5 billion in cloud spend. So we have a ton of information flowing through our platform, and it's incredibly performant for all needs. If you have some questions or you'd like to learn more about us, you can check us out at ternary.app. Specifically myself, you can find me on LinkedIn as /Andrew Peter. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike for the demo, which I'm excited for you guys to all see it.
All right. Thanks, AJ. So we're going to start from the top here. To build on what AJ just described, we are looking at a blended model where we are bringing in the detailed billing records from the various cloud providers. So this is classic FinOps for hypervisors. But we also have these additional charges we're bringing in called non-cloud costs. So let me do a couple of things here. I want to highlight just how much that represents in our data. So I get rid of the cloud providers. You'll see that right now we're bringing in addition to the several million we're spending on cloud, there's a pretty good chunk of costs that are coming that we're accounting for in Ternary that are not coming from AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Snowflake, OCI. We're bringing these in as a CSV file, and I'll show you where that comes from in just a second. But we're stitching it together within Ternary. And we're doing it in a couple of ways. First off, we're bringing it in so the time series is married up together, but we're also common labeling that information coming in with the existing labels we have from our hypervisor usage. So, for example, if you look down below here, if I focus just on the non-cloud costs, things like I might want to account for payroll, personnel that we're supporting an application. I might want to account for shipping costs if I'm running an online store. I might want to account for data center costs for applications which are deployed in a hybrid model and might have some on-premises costs associated with them still. CDN services, things that I'm paying for outside of my standard hypervisor. Maybe I'm paying for someone to accelerate my content. These are all adjacencies to our operating costs that are not accounted for in the standard billing. And what we're doing is we're bringing that all into Ternary. And we are labeling it so that it lines up with the applications in Ternary that we're actually hosting in the cloud. So if I want to be able to zoom in on the data, I want to understand if I'm talking about my online store, it's got some cloud costs and it's got some non-cloud costs, but now I can stitch it all together and say, give me sort of a total cost to deliver that application, inclusive of things which may not show up in my AWS Core or my subscription export from AWS or from Azure. All right, so bringing them in, stitching them together in time series, and also common labeling. So it's all supporting that standard FinOps model. Let me zoom in on this just a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in on the non-cloud costs specifically. And what we're doing is we're actually highlighting the details of those specific costs that we're looking at. Whatever you've brought in is going to be common, it's going to be stitched together. So all of these now become just reporting dimensions within Ternary. We are using a focus model. I'm going to show you how we implement that in just a bit, but it's all stitched together. So it's just one big extended bill, and I can work with it in one interrogative interface. Now, to AJ's point, I really want to zoom in on how we're implementing this schema because it's super important, and this is a differentiator for us. When we built the foundation for this, we built it on the focus model, and that allows us to use all of these common dimensions that are provided by the FinOps Foundation. So this is their standard focus dimensions. But we are also persisting all of those specific dimensions that are available not only from the cloud providers, but also anything that we may be bringing in from our external data sources. So I have my FinOps model plus I have that plus all the standard AWS metrics that don't fit naturally into the focus model. Azure metrics don't fit commonly into the focus model. So we're not losing anything in the process. If I wanted to report on benefit name, well, there's no place in focus for benefit name, which is an Azure custom field, but we don't lose it in the translation. So you get all the benefit of having the focus model plus any additional metrics you bring in using the bring your own data, plus all of the other additional columns that are available from the cloud providers. So it's sort of a yes and model. Bring us data, we'll find a home for it. We'll be able to report across all of that for you. Let me show you really quickly how we bring in this bring your own data. I'm going to start off first with what the data actually can be. So we talked about some of those things that we were looking at earlier, where we're talking about the payroll costs, or we're looking at marketing costs, or anything that we're basically paying for as an ancillary charge that's supporting our applications running in the cloud. So if you can describe it, you can put it in Ternary. You can additionally describe that data using the labeling that we're going to read from that data. And it comes in basically as a CSV file. You can see this is what that form looks like. Very simple. You can shape it from either a billing artifact coming from that provider or shape it yourself. But when you load it into Ternary, it's a very straightforward process. So I now have data I want to bring into the platform. I'm going to create a new integration, which is my own data set. We can host it in any one of the cloud providers that we support. We are expecting it to be in a cloud resident URL. So in this case, I can say I already have that data running in BigQuery. And I want to load it into my tenant. So I'm just going to give it an example. I'm going to give it the place it lives. And this is wherever you have hosted that information based in this case, it's all on Google. I can say fetch the data sets that are out there and says, which one do you want to use? And I want to use this one. So I'm pointing to a place in the cloud, which is hosting basically this file. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to read that into Ternary. You don't have to tell us a whole lot about it. Ternary is really good at understanding the form of the data that it's looking at. You can say, please bring in a sample of that data. Show me the columns that will be in there. Yes, that is the data I want to see. That's correct. Now I can tell it what to do with it. So first I have to tell it, where does my date column live? It interprets it, it guesses and says, I think it's in column 1. Is that correct? You just say yes. And now what it's already done is it's read the rest of the columns. In this case, there's 3 additional columns. And it says, I think, based on what I'm looking at, that this column B should be the build cost metric. I think column C should be labels because that's what it looks like to me. So we're actually interpreting the data and trying to assign it to the right place. You can override that decision. If we made a bad call that it should be build cost, but instead it should be something else, you can choose any other dimension you want, right? So in this case, I want to say this is my discount category as an example. You overridden Ternary's decision, right? Or if I want to create a net new thing, I can say don't line it up with the charge description that's in Ternary. I want to add my own thing. And you can put your own name in. So you are in control of the journey here. But the point I wanted to make is that we figure out the best pattern of the data for you. We apply those suggestions for you. We can then put that information in place, and you apply the suggestions, and then you can read that data in. Now, with that done, then it just becomes a natural extension of what Ternary does. All of your cloud data, all of your commonly labeled non-cloud data, all stitched together on whatever labels or dimensions you provided us in that input. Okay. So I want to show you one other thing within the Ternary solution that I think is going to make it even more important. So now we're stitching together cloud and non-cloud costs, all in one common model. I now understand the costs for my applications. Now in my example here, I have several applications I'm supporting. I'm supporting, in this case, a streaming service, customer portal, website, and a support site that's basically hosting chat sessions. Within Ternary, we can also bring in another form of data, which is volumetric output data. What did the application actually produce? In the case of a streaming service, how many streams did it serve? In the case of an application that's sold by seat, how many active users did I have on the platform? So within Ternary, we're able to take that information and say, I know what the build cost was, but I also know the number of active users you have on the platform. So that's another form of bring your own data, if you will, that you can put in. So if I can say, I know what the overall cost is, cloud and non-cloud all put together, I know how many users are on the platform. Can you tell me, Ternary, what's the cost to support an active user on the platform? In this case, it's setting to 12 cents to support an active user on the platform. So we're taking not only the overall cost, but the number of users on the platform and being able to compute cost per active user. This is a first step into sort of doing, a custom math on the platform that allows us to take a very broad stroke of cost data as a numerator, inclusive of non-cloud costs, and also put into it a denominator that represents the business output of that application. So I can, in this case, I know the cost per user of an application, cost of the number of streams served, because I have, in this case, the number of streams that are reviewed on the application as well. So now you get to the sort of the cost to serve, which I think is sort of the holy grail for finance. We're paying for all these services. We're paying for all these cloud costs. What's our margin? What is it costing us to host that application and deliver it versus what are we charging for it? So in this case, if I'm, it's 8 cents per stream served and I'm charging 10 cents, then my margin is 20%. Those are the calculations finance cannot make unless they can bring that data into one place and answer these questions using a common language. And that's really what Ternary is providing here. So I know I went through that very quickly. Hopefully I made the key points that we are bringing this into Ternary. We are stitching it together with our existing focus dimensions. We are losing nothing in translation. We will map your columns on top of the hypervisor provided columns as well. And you will be able to do common labeling, be able to do scoped views, all those things that Ternary does classically. But now we're going to be able to do that with this additional external data coming into the platform. And that external data can take basically whatever form you need it to take, as long as it makes sense to stitch it together. In some cases, it may not make sense to stitch it together, but you just want to report on it. You can do that as well. I just want to have it in a report next to my cloud costs. I'm not going to stitch them together, but it'd be really cool if I could see how much I'm paying for, the lights in my property costs right next to my cloud costs. I'm not going to try to integrate them, but I just want to know what's it costing me for, rent and utilities and everything for physical plant right next to my cloud costs. So Marie and AJ, I am going to hand it back over to you if there are any questions. I haven't been seeing any pop up in the chat, but maybe you've seen some.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, AJ. We do have a question in the chat. So our first question is, how do cloud tags and labels influence reporting and groupings in Ternary reporting?
Excellent. So we will bring in any of your native cloud labels. So we will have that information directly from the billing artifacts. So anything you put on resources, projects, accounts, subscriptions, we bring that into the platform. What we have found is generally the case, is that those tags are imperfect and need to be improved upon. So there might be holes in the labeling. There might be services you can't label for. I might one-time charge that comes through and shows up in Marketplace. I can't put a label on that, but I'd like to attach a label. So Ternary will bring in all the native labels, but we will also allow you to improve upon those labels within Ternary. So it's often the case that we need to clarify, clean up, and improve labels within Ternary, and we can do that. So I might have situations where I have a series of SKUs that I want to call one thing, and they're all coming from different patterns. They're all coming from different providers in different ways. Or I might want to apply in Ternary a set of organizational labels that are not present in the native data. So in this case, I might want to put in a department key for engineering, marketing, sales, human resources. And I'm doing it using attributes coming in from the billing data, and I'm assigning them in Ternary. Now, no, we're not writing back to the cloud. We're not actually asserting labels back on resources and projects. We are doing this in Ternary. So we're doing this work in the platform, but we can do exactly the same work with your cloud and non-cloud data. So at the end of the day, if I say, go show me all costs associated with engineering, it'll include anything that possesses that label, whether it came from the native cloud, was added internally, or came in from your BYOD data. We really don't care. We join it all together.
Great, thank you. And as a reminder, please feel free to ask questions either in the webinar chat window or in the Q&A window. We'll hang out for a few more minutes in case any more questions come through. Thank you so much. Have a great day.